Hey folks, before the video starts, please leave a like and subscribe to cheer me up. Make sure you are relaxed and enjoy today's stories. My dead grandpa changed his face before his death. I found out on the dark web why. Alright, Reddit. This is going to be long, and honestly, it's pretty disturbing. I need to get this off my chest because it's been haunting me for months. If you have a weak stomach or you're easily disturbed, you might want to stop reading now. So my grandpa was always a bit of an odd guy. He was one of those old men who didn't really talk much about his past, and when he did, it was always vague. He had these weird habits too. Like, he'd always have a knife on him, and he was obsessed with skinning animals. He'd always say it was for practice, which made no sense to any of us. He lived alone in this rundown house in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a mile away and there's no cell reception. When he got sick, my parents insisted we take turns visiting him to make sure he was all right. That's how I ended up spending the last few weeks of his life with him. The first thing that struck me was how different he looked. His face was strange, like it was his, but it wasn't. Almost like someone had stretched his skin too tight over his skull. His eyes seemed to sink deeper into his head, and there were these weird, jagged scars along his jawline. I asked him about it once, and he just gave me this dead-eyed stare and said, "Don't worry about it, kid." I figured he was just getting old and maybe had some bad surgery. But then, things started to get really weird. At night, I'd hear him talking to himself, whispering, almost like he was having a conversation. Sometimes I'd catch words, but they were always in some language I didn't understand. It sounded harsh and guttural, not like anything I'd ever heard. One night, I decided to record him. I know, it sounds messed up, but I had to know what he was saying. When I played it back the next day, I nearly threw up. His voice was there, sure, but there was something else. Another voice layered under his. It was deeper, darker, and it seemed to be guiding him, giving him instructions. He got worse too. His skin started to peel away in places, and he had covered it up with these crude bandages. I offered to take him to a doctor, but he refused. One night, he caught me staring at the bandages and just said, "You wouldn't understand. It's almost over." The day before he died, I found him in the basement. I didn't even know he had a basement. It was filled with the most disturbing stuff I've ever seen. Jars filled with what looked like preserved skin, crude tools, and knives. There was this large wooden table in the center, stained with what I can only assume was blood. He was sitting there, carving something into his arm. I froze, too terrified to move. When he noticed me, he just smiled. "It's okay," he said. "It's almost time." That night, he died, but it wasn't peaceful. He screamed and thrashed in his bed, ripping at his skin, tearing off the bandages. I tried to hold him down, to stop him from hurting himself, but he was so strong. Eventually, he just stopped. His body went limp, and his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. The police came, took one look at his body, and called it a natural death. But I knew better. There was nothing natural about what I'd seen. They took him away, and I thought that would be the end of it. But I couldn't get those voices out of my head. I had to know what was really going on. So I did what any sane person wouldn't do. I went on the dark web. I figured if there were answers, I'd find them there. I searched for days, going through the darkest corners of the internet, I won't go into details about what I saw there, but let's just say it was the stuff of nightmares. Finally, I found something. A forum, buried deep in the web, dedicated to skinwalkers, not the mythical kind, but something far worse. These were people who believed they could extend their lives by taking the skin of others. They called it the transference. My blood ran cold as I read post after post. They talked about rituals, the tools they used, and the voices they heard, voices that guided them, promised them eternal life. They described the process in gruesome detail, skinning the victim, preserving the skin, and then wearing it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It sounded insane, but it matched everything I'd seen. The scars, the preserved skin, the voices. My grandpa had been one of them. He'd been trying to transfer his soul into a new body, to live again. I had to stop. I felt sick, like I was going to throw up, but I couldn't. I needed to know more. That's when I found the pictures. Hidden in a thread, they were photos of the process. I won't describe them in detail, but they were the most horrific thing I've ever seen. Bodies flayed open, skin stretched and pinned, faces frozen in eternal screams. Then I saw him, my grandpa. In one of the pictures, his face was half peeled away, revealing the raw muscle underneath. He was smiling, holding a knife, standing over a body. I couldn't look away. I wanted to, but I couldn't. This was real. This was my grandpa. I shut down my computer and sat in the dark, trying to process everything. How could this be real? How could someone do this? But the evidence was right there in front of me. My grandpa had been a monster, and I had no idea. I thought about going to the police, but what could I say? Hey, my dead grandpa was a skinwalker, and I found pictures on the dark web. They'd think I was crazy, and maybe I was, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to know the truth, no matter how disturbing it was. That's when I decided to go back to his house. I needed to see if there was more evidence, something that could explain all this. So I packed a bag and headed out. Little did I know, the horrors I had uncovered were only the beginning. When I got to my grandpa's house, it was just as creepy as I remembered. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy, and the place looked like it hadn't seen a decent clean in decades. I parked my car and just sat there for a minute, trying to gather my nerves. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I knew it wouldn't be pleasant. I let myself in with the key I still had. The smell hit me first, a mix of mold, rot, and something else I couldn't place. It was worse than before, almost like the house was decaying from the inside out. I headed straight for the basement, the last place I'd seen my grandpa alive. The basement door creaked open, and the stairs groaned under my weight as I descended. I could see the outline of that horrifying table in the dim light. The jars were still there, lined up like some grotesque collection. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I pushed forward. I started going through everything. There were old books, most of them in languages I couldn't read. Some had pictures that made my stomach churn. Diagrams of skin being peeled away, detailed instructions on preservation techniques, and symbols that looked like they were straight out of a nightmare. In the corner, I found a box filled with tools, knives of various sizes, scalpels, and other instruments I couldn't even name. Each one was stained with dried blood. I tried not to think about whose blood it might be. Then I found a journal. It was old, the leather cover cracked and worn. I opened it and started reading. It was my grandpa's handwriting, and what I read made my blood run cold. He talked about his work, about how he discovered the transference. He wrote about the first time he tried it, how he captured a drifter, skinned him alive, and attempted to wear his skin. It didn't work, but he wasn't deterred. He wrote about hearing the voices for the first time, how they guided him, told him what to do. The entries got more and more disturbing. He described in detail how he refined his techniques, how he learned to keep the skin alive longer, how to bind it to his own flesh. He mentioned others, people he met on the dark web who were doing the same thing. They shared tips, traded victims, and even met up in person to perform rituals. The last few entries were the worst. He talked about feeling the wear and tear of his own body, how he needed a fresh one soon. He wrote about targeting me, his own grandson. He planned to use me next. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. I felt like I was going to be sick. The man I thought I knew, the man who had bounced me on his knee and told me stories, was a monster. And he had planned to use me in his twisted experiments. I had to get out of there. But as I turned to leave, I heard something, a faint whisper, almost like a breath on the back of my neck. I whipped around, but there was no one there. I told myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it was something more. I ran up the stairs, but halfway up, I tripped. I fell hard, knocking over a stack of old boxes. Papers flew everywhere, and something metal clattered to the floor. I picked myself up, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. It was a small rusty key. It looked ancient, like it belonged to some antique chest. I picked it up and pocketed it, not sure what it was for, but knowing it was important. I hurried out of the basement, slamming the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked a few miles away. I couldn't go home. I couldn't risk bringing whatever horror my grandpa had been involved with back to my family. I barely slept, jumping at every noise, every shadow. The next morning, I decided to go back one last time. I had to find out what that key opened. The house seemed even creepier in the daylight, if that was possible. I went through every room, trying the key in every lock I could find. Finally, in his bedroom, I found a small locked drawer in his nightstand. The key fit perfectly. Inside, I found a small leather-bound book. It was different from the journal. This one seemed older, much older. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a photo. It was of my grandpa, but much younger, standing next to another man who looked almost exactly like him. They could have been twins, except the other man's eyes were darker, more menacing. The book was filled with more disturbing stuff, rituals, incantations, and more of those strange symbols. There were also more photos, each one more disturbing than the last. People in various stages of the skinning process, their faces contorted in agony, and in every photo, there was my grandpa, overseeing the process, his face a mask of calm. The last page had a drawing. It was a rough sketch of a man, his skin flayed open, with my grandpa's face superimposed over it. Underneath, in scrawled handwriting, were the words, "Eternal life through pain and blood." I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. This was too much. I had to leave, had to get away from this house and everything in it. But as I turned to leave, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I froze, too terrified to move. Slowly, I turned around, but there was no one there. I ran out of the house, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove away as fast as I could, not looking back. I didn't know what I was going to do next. but I knew I couldn't stay there. As I drove, I kept hearing the whispers, feeling that cold touch. It was like my grandpa's spirit was following me, refusing to let me go. I don't know what he did to himself, or how deep his connection to this dark world went, but I knew one thing for sure. I was in danger, and whatever he had started, it wasn't over yet. I drove until the sun started to set, not really knowing where I was going. I ended up in a small motel off a lonely highway. The place was run down, but I didn't care. I just needed somewhere to think, somewhere that wasn't my grandpa's house. The room was dingy, with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell. I threw my bag on the bed and sat down, pulling out the small leather book. I didn't want to look at it again, but I had to. There had to be some clue, some explanation for what my grandpa had become. I opened the book and started reading more closely. The rituals were horrifying, detailing step by step how to flay a person and prepare their skin. But what really caught my eye were the incantations. They were written in that same strange language I'd heard my grandpa speaking. I had no idea what they meant, but they were obviously important. I spent hours poring over the book, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a section about the Watchers. According to the book, these were ancient beings that guided the transference. They promised eternal life, but there was a cost: the soul of the person performing the ritual. The more I read, the more I realized my grandpa hadn't just been trying to extend his life. He'd been trying to escape these Watchers, to break free from their control. But he had failed, and now they were coming for me. I threw the book down, feeling a wave of nausea. This was insane. It couldn't be real, but the evidence was right there in my grandpa's handwriting, and deep down, I knew it was true. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those horrific images from the book, and the whispers. They were getting louder. It was like they were inside my head, urging me to continue my grandpa's work. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The motel was surrounded by woods, and the air was cool and crisp. As I walked, I started to feel a little better. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe the stress of my grandpa's death was getting to me. Then I heard it, a rustling in the bushes. I froze, straining to see in the darkness. Slowly, a figure emerged. It was a man, but his face was wrong. It looked like it had been stitched together from different pieces of skin. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light. I backed away, but he stepped forward, his mouth curling into a grotesque smile. "You can't run from them," he said, his voice a harsh whisper. "They'll find you, just like they found him." I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back in my room. I locked the door and pushed a chair against it, my heart pounding. This was real. The Watchers were real, and they were coming for me. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the bed, clutching the leather book like a talisman. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They promised me power, eternal life, everything my grandpa had wanted. All I had to do was continue his work. By morning, I was a wreck. I knew I couldn't stay in the motel, but I had no idea where to go. Then I remembered the small rusty key I'd found in my grandpa's basement. There was one place I hadn't checked, his attic. Maybe there was something there that could help me. I packed my things and drove back to my grandpa's house, the dread growing with every mile. The house seemed even more foreboding in the daylight. I hesitated at the door, but I knew I had to go in. The attic door was hidden behind a panel, in the ceiling. I pulled it down, revealing a rickety ladder. The attic was dark and dusty, filled with old furniture and boxes. I started searching, looking for anything that might give me answers. In the far corner, I found a chest. It was old and covered in cobwebs. I pulled out the key and unlocked it, my hands shaking. Inside, I found more of my grandpa's tools and another journal, but this one was different. It was written in a language I couldn't understand, and the pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams. At the bottom of the chest, I found a small box. Inside was a letter, addressed to me. I opened it, my heart racing. Dear my name, if you're reading this, it means I've failed. The Watchers have taken me, and they're coming for you. I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted this for you, but I had no choice. The transference was my only hope of escaping them, but it was a lie. They promised me eternal life, but all they've given me is pain. You need to destroy the book. Burn it. Bury it. Do whatever it takes. It's the only way to break the cycle. Don't let them take you too. Grandpa, I felt a surge of anger and fear. My grandpa had condemned me to this nightmare, and now it was up to me to end it. I took the book and the tools and headed outside. I built a small fire in the backyard and threw the book in, watching as the flames consumed it. As the last page burned, I felt a strange sense of relief. The whispers stopped, and the air seemed to clear. I knew it wasn't over, but it was a start. I left my grandpa's house for the last time, hoping that I'd done enough to break the curse. But deep down, I knew the Watchers weren't finished with me. They would come again, and next time, I might not be so lucky. I thought burning the book would end it. I hoped the whispers would stop, and the eerie sense of being watched would fade. For a few days, it seemed like things were getting back to normal. I went home, back to my routine, and tried to forget about everything that had happened, but the peace didn't last. The first sign that something was still wrong came one night when I was in bed. I woke up to the feeling of something cold pressing against my chest. I opened my eyes and saw a shadowy figure standing over me. It had no face, just a blank, dark void where its features should have been. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure leaned closer, and I heard a whisper in my ear. You cannot escape. I bolted upright, gasping for air. The figure was gone, but the fear remained. I barely slept that night, every creak of the house making my heart race. The next day, I noticed something else. My reflection in the mirror looked different. My skin seemed paler, almost translucent, and there were dark circles under my eyes. It was like I was being drained, bit by bit. Desperate for answers, I went back on the dark web. I found the forum where I'd first learned about the transference. I posted about my experience, hoping someone could help me. It didn't take long for the replies to come in. Most of them were useless people telling me to see a priest or to move to a new house. But one message stood out. It was from someone named Watcher Seeker. You're marked, they wrote. Burning the book wasn't enough. The Watchers have their hooks in you, and they won't let go until they get what they want. You need to perform a counter ritual to sever the connection. It's dangerous, but it's your only hope. They sent me a set of instructions. It was complicated and involved some pretty disturbing steps, but I was willing to try anything at this point. The first thing I needed was a mirror, one that had been used in a similar ritual before. I had no idea where to find something like that, but Watcher Seekers said they could help. They directed me to a location on the outskirts of town, an old abandoned house that had supposedly been used for dark rituals. I drove there that night. The house was a crumbling, eerie structure, surrounded by overgrown weeds and trees. I parked and made my way inside, flashlight in hand. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and every shadow seemed to move on its own. In the basement, I found what I was looking for. A large, ornate mirror covered in dust and cobwebs. It had an unsettling presence, almost like it was watching me. I took it and headed back to my car, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being followed. Back home, I set up the mirror in my bedroom, following the instructions to the letter. I drew symbols on the floor around it. Using a mixture of ash and blood, I lit candles and started chanting the words Watcher Seeker had given me. The air grew colder, and I felt a presence in the room, something dark and malevolent. As I continued the ritual, the mirror started to change. The surface rippled like water, and I saw shapes moving within it, faces twisted and grotesque, pressed against the glass. They whispered to me, voices overlapping in a cacophony of torment. "Join us," they said. "Your soul is ours." I fought to keep my focus, finishing the chant. The mirror began to glow, a sickly green light that filled the room. The faces inside it screamed, and the glass shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. The candles blew out, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard a low, guttural growl behind me. I turned, and there it was, the faceless figure from my nightmares. But this time, it was more solid, more real. It lunged at me, and I barely managed to dodge. I grabbed one of the shards of glass from the mirror and slashed at it, feeling a strange resistance as it connected. The figure recoiled, and I kept attacking, each strike seeming to weaken it. Finally, with a final, desperate swing, I struck its chest. It let out a horrible, ear-piercing scream and dissolved into a cloud of dark smoke, which dissipated into the air. I collapsed on the floor, exhausted and terrified. The room was a mess, and I was covered in cuts from the glass, but the oppressive presence was gone. The whispers had stopped. I had done it. I had broken the connection, or so I thought. In the days that followed, things seemed to improve. The dark circles under my eyes faded, and I started to feel like myself again. But there were still signs that something wasn't right. I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, and I felt like I was being watched. At night, I'd hear faint whispers just on the edge of hearing. One night, I woke up to find my reflection staring back at me from the mirror across the room, but I hadn't moved. My reflection grinned, a twisted, malevolent smile, and whispered, "It's not over." The next morning, I received another message from Watcher Seeker. "They won't give up that easily," it read. "Be prepared for what's coming next." I didn't know what they meant, but I knew one thing for sure. The nightmare was far from over, and the true horror was only just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, clutching a knife and waiting for something to happen. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The house was silent, but I could feel a tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Morning came, and I was a mess. Exhausted and paranoid, I decided I needed to confront this head-on. Watcher Seeker's last message had said to be prepared, but they hadn't given me any more details. I messaged them back, pleading for more information, but there was no response. I couldn't stay in the house. I felt like the walls were closing in on me, the shadows growing longer and darker. I decided to go back to my grandpa's house one last time. Maybe there was something I'd missed, some clue that could help me understand what was happening. When I arrived, the house was just as I'd left it, empty, decaying, and filled with an oppressive sense of dread. I made my way to the attic, where I had found the key and the book. The chest was still there, its contents scattered from my last visit. I searched through everything again, more methodically this time. Underneath some old papers, I found another journal. It was older, the pages yellowed and brittle. This one wasn't my grandpa's handwriting. It was someone else's, someone who had written in the same strange language as the incantations. I couldn't read it, but there were drawings, diagrams of rituals, and symbols I recognized from the first book. At the back of the journal was a folded piece of paper, newer than the rest of the book. I opened it, and to my surprise, it was written in English. It seemed to be a letter, addressed to my grandpa. Dear Charles, if you're reading this, then you've discovered the truth. The Watchers are relentless, and their grip on our family is unbreakable. I tried to escape them, but it only brought more suffering. The ritual you found was incomplete. There is no way to sever the connection completely, but there is one final option: the binding. The binding is a ritual that will transfer the Watcher's attention from you to another. It is a dark and dangerous process, one that requires a willing sacrifice. The sacrifice must be someone close to you, someone who shares your blood. It is the only way to end the torment. I couldn't bring myself to do it, but perhaps you are stronger than I was. Your father. My heart sank as I read the letter. The binding, a willing sacrifice. It was monstrous, but if it was the only way to end this, did I have a choice? My mind raced as I tried to think of another way, any other way, but the whispers were growing louder, more insistent. They were pushing me towards this dark path. I left the attic and sat in my car, staring at the house. I couldn't sacrifice someone else. I couldn't condemn another person to this fate. But what if the alternative was worse? What if the Watchers took me and then came for my family anyway? As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Watcher Seeker. Meet me at the old church on Elm Street at midnight. I have something that might help. Elm Street was in the older part of town, where buildings were abandoned and forgotten. The church was a crumbling relic, its windows broken, and its doors hanging off their hinges. I arrived just before midnight, the full moon casting eerie shadows across the graveyard. Inside, it was dark and cold. I made my way to the altar, where a single candle flickered. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a woman, her face hidden by a hood. "You're Watcher Seeker?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded. "I'm here to help you, but you need to understand something. The Watchers are ancient and powerful. They don't let go easily. The binding is dangerous, but it might be your only chance." I told her about the letter, about the willing sacrifice. She listened, her face unreadable. When I finished, she shook her head. "There's another way," she said, "but it's even riskier. There's a ritual called the banishment. It requires confronting the Watchers directly, forcing them back to where they came from. It's dangerous, and if you fail, they'll take you, body and soul." I swallowed hard. "What do I need to do?" She handed me a piece of paper with more incantations and instructions. "You'll need to perform this at the stroke of midnight. during the full moon. You must draw them out, confront them, and force them back. It won't be easy, and they will try to deceive you. I nodded, my mind made up. I couldn't sacrifice someone else. I would rather face the watchers myself. She wished me luck and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the dark church. I went back to my grandpa's house one last time. It was the only place I felt the ritual could be done. I set up the room, drawing the symbols on the floor, lighting candles, and preparing myself mentally for what was to come. As midnight approached, I began the chant, my voice echoing in the empty house. The temperature dropped and the candles flickered. I felt a presence, then another, and another. The watchers were here. Their whispers grew louder, more frantic, trying to break my concentration. I kept chanting, forcing myself to focus. The shadows in the room twisted and writhed, forming shapes, figures with glowing eyes and twisted faces. They surrounded me, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of torment. "You cannot banish us," they hissed. "You are ours." I felt their cold hands reaching for me, pulling at my skin, my soul. I screamed the final words of the ritual, pouring every ounce of my will into the incantation. The symbols on the floor glowed brightly, and the watchers recoiled, their forms dissolving into smoke. For a moment, it seemed like it was working. The room grew brighter, the shadows retreating. But then, a final, desperate whisper filled my ears. "This isn't over." There was a blinding flash of light, and I was thrown across the room. When I opened my eyes, the house was silent. The candles were out, and the symbols had faded. I lay there, panting, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The watchers were gone. I left the house, my body aching, my mind exhausted. I didn't know if the ritual had worked, if I had truly banished them, or if they were just biding their time. But for now, the whispers were gone, and I felt a sense of peace. In the days that followed, I waited for the signs to return, for the shadows to move, for the whispers to start again. But they didn't. It seemed like the nightmare was finally over. But deep down, I knew that the watchers were still out there, somewhere, waiting, and if they ever came back, I would be ready. I found my dead sister on a dark web circus playing clown. Hey Reddit, I'm honestly shaking as I type this, but I need to get it out. Maybe someone can help me make sense of it. Or maybe it'll just help me sleep tonight. I don't know. Here goes. My sister Lily went missing 2 years ago. She was only 19. One day she was there, laughing, joking, and the next, she was just gone. No note, no clue, nothing. The cops looked, we looked, everyone looked, but there was no trace. It was like she had just vanished into thin air. My family was torn apart, especially my mom. She fell into a deep depression and hasn't been the same since. I think some part of me gave up hope after a year, thinking I'd never see her again, at least not alive. But then I saw her. I work in IT, and part of my job involves dealing with cybersecurity threats. So I'm no stranger to the dark web. It's a horrible place full of disgusting and illegal things, but it's part of my job to know how to navigate it. A few weeks ago, I was doing a routine check on some flagged sites. That's when I stumbled across a link titled "The Circus of the Damned." I was curious and bored, so I clicked on it. The page was dark, with flickering neon lights that made it look like an old, decrepit carnival. There were chat rooms and video feeds, all filled with the most depraved shit you could imagine. People getting hurt, tortured, killed even. It was sick. I was about to close the page when something caught my eye. A live video feed with a caption that read, "The Star Clown." It was grainy, but I could see a figure in a clown costume standing in the middle of a dimly lit room. Something about it drew me in, so I clicked on it. The screen went black for a moment, then slowly faded back in. The room was small, maybe an old basement, with moldy walls and a single dangling light bulb, casting eerie shadows. In the center of the room was a girl dressed as a clown. She had on a bright red wig, white face paint, and a tattered clown outfit. But it was her eyes that got me. They were wide with fear, and even through the makeup, I recognized them. They were Lily's eyes. My heart stopped. I leaned in closer, thinking I must be wrong, but then she spoke, and her voice, God, her voice. It was shaky and hoarse, but it was hers. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice cracking. "Welcome to the show." I couldn't believe it. My dead sister was alive and in some twisted circus on the dark web. The chat room went wild with comments. People were excited, making bets, and asking for all sorts of horrifying things. The host, some masked freak, started giving commands. "Dance, clown," he said. Lily hesitated for a moment, then started moving awkwardly. It was clear she didn't know what she was doing, and it broke my heart to see her like that. Then things got worse. The host commanded her to perform tricks, humiliating things. The audience cheered and laughed, throwing virtual tips at the screen. I wanted to reach through and pull her out, but I was paralyzed with fear and disgust. And then it happened. One of the commands was to make the audience laugh, and when she failed, the host shocked her with a cattle prod. She screamed, and I nearly puked. I watched, horrified, as they continued to torture her for their amusement. They made her do horrible things I can't even bring myself to write down. The camera zoomed in on her face, and I could see the tears streaming down her painted cheeks. The chat was full of sick bastards enjoying every second of it. I wanted to shut it off, but I couldn't. I had to know what happened to her. Eventually, the host ended the feed, promising more entertainment the next night. I was left staring at my screen, numb and shaking. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't go to the cops. They'd never believe me, and even if they did, they'd probably just shut the site down without rescuing her. I had to find a way to get her out myself. I spent the next few days diving deeper into the dark web, trying to track down the source of the video. I didn't eat, barely slept, and my mind was consumed with images of Lily being tortured. I found forums where people talked about the circus, sharing links and discussing the different performers. It was like they were trading baseball cards or something. I felt like I was losing my mind. Finally, I found a lead. A guy on one of the forums mentioned a location. He was vague, but it was enough for me to go on. I packed a bag, told my boss I was taking some time off, and headed out to the address he gave. It was in the middle of nowhere, an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the town. When I got there, it was just as creepy as I imagined. The place was falling apart, with broken windows and graffiti all over the walls. I snuck in through a side door, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, it was dark and musty, with old circus posters peeling off the walls. I made my way through the corridors, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Then I heard it. faint music coming from somewhere below me. I followed the sound, down a set of stairs and into a basement. The music got louder, and I could hear voices laughing and shouting. I crept closer, peeking around a corner, and there she was, Lily, in her clown costume, performing for a small crowd of masked people. The host was there too, laughing and pointing as she stumbled through her routine. I was about to burst in when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to see a man standing behind me, his face hidden in the shadows. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and menacing. Before I could react, he grabbed me and dragged me back up the stairs. I fought, but he was too strong. He threw me into a room and locked the door behind me. I banged on the door, screaming for Lily, but no one came. I was trapped, helpless, and terrified. And then the lights went out. Hey, Reddit. Thanks for the support and suggestions from everyone who read part 1. I'm still pretty shaken up, but here's the continuation of my story. I don't know how long I was in that room. It felt like hours, maybe longer. I banged on the door, screamed, and even tried to break it down, but it was solid. My knuckles were bloody, and my voice was hoarse. Eventually, I collapsed against the wall, exhausted and hopeless. The room was pitch black. No windows, no lights, nothing. I fumbled around in my pockets and found my phone. The battery was low, but I used it to light up the space. It was small and bare, with just a dirty mattress on the floor. The walls were covered in scribbles, like someone had been writing or drawing on them in the dark. I couldn't make out what they said, but they gave me chills. As I sat there, trying to figure out my next move, I heard footsteps outside. My heart raced. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, backlit by a dim light from the hallway. It was the same man who had grabbed me before. He was tall and thin, wearing a dirty trench coat and a clown mask. The mask was grotesque, with a twisted, smiling mouth and hollow eyes. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. "Who are you?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling. He tilted his head, like he was considering my question. Then he spoke, his voice muffled by the mask. "I'm the ringmaster," he said. "Welcome to my circus." I wanted to punch him, to scream at him, but I was too scared. "What do you want?" I asked. He chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "You came here, didn't you? You wanted to see the show." "I want my sister," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I know she's here." He laughed again, louder this time. "Oh, you'll see her soon enough. But first, you need to understand the rules. This isn't a place for heroes." He turned and left the room, slamming the door behind him. The lights went out again, and I was plunged back into darkness. I sat there shaking, trying to come up with a plan. I couldn't stay in that room forever. I had to find a way out, find Lily, and get us both out of there. I don't know how much time passed, but eventually, the door opened again. This time, it was 2 men. They grabbed me, hauling me to my feet. I struggled, but they were too strong. They dragged me down the hallway and into another room. This one was larger, with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room was a chair, and in the chair was Lily. She was tied up, her face smeared with makeup and tears. When she saw me, her eyes widened with a mix of fear and hope. "Jake," she whispered. "Lily," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm going to get you out of here." The ringmaster stepped into the light, his mask gleaming. "Reunited at last," he said mockingly. "But I'm afraid the show must go on." He nodded to the men, who forced me into a chair opposite Lily. They tied me up, making sure I couldn't move. I struggled, but it was no use. The ringmaster walked over to Lily, caressing her cheek with a gloved hand. She flinched, but he held her still. "You see, Jake," he said, turning to me, "this is a family business. And now that you're here, you're part of the family too." He pulled out a small handheld camera and pointed it at us. "Smile for the audience," he said, laughing. The men started setting up equipment, lights, cameras, and a backdrop that looked like an old circus tent. They were filming us, broadcasting us to the sickos on the dark web. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to get us out of this, but I was tied up, helpless, and terrified. The ringmaster walked over to a table and picked up a knife. He held it up, letting the light glint off the blade. "Tonight's performance," he said, "is going to be very special, a true family affair." He walked over to me, the knife in his hand. I tensed, expecting the worst, but instead of hurting me, he cut the ropes binding me to the chair. "Stand up," he ordered. I did as he said, my legs shaky and weak. He handed me the knife. "Now, Jake," he said, his voice low and menacing, "you're going to entertain our guests, or your sister pays the price." I looked at the knife in my hand, then at Lily. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do it, Jake," she whispered. "Please." The ringmaster grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "Do it," he hissed, "or she dies." I had no choice. I raised the knife, my hand trembling. The camera zoomed in, capturing every moment. The audience was going wild in the chat, egging me on, demanding blood. I felt sick, my mind racing. I couldn't hurt my sister, but I couldn't let her die either. Then I remembered the phone in my pocket. The battery was almost dead, but maybe, just maybe, it could be my way out. I had to act fast. I dropped the knife, pretending to fumble it. The ringmaster cursed, stepping forward to pick it up. That's when I made my move. I lunged at him, knocking him off balance. We both fell to the ground, the knife skidding across the floor. The men rushed forward, but I was already on my feet, pulling the phone from my pocket. I hit the emergency call button, praying it would connect. The room exploded into chaos. The ringmaster shouted orders. The men tried to grab me, and Lily screamed. But I held onto the phone, keeping it close, hoping someone would hear. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The door burst open, and a group of police officers stormed in, guns drawn. "Get down!" one of them shouted. The ringmaster and his men froze, then tried to run, but it was too late. The cops tackled them, pinning them to the ground. I rushed over to Lily, untying her ropes. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "It's okay," I whispered, holding her tight. "We're safe now." The police rounded up the ringmaster and his men, leading them out in handcuffs. One of the officers came over to us, his face stern but kind. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, still holding Lily. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. "I think we're going to be okay." "Hey, Reddit, it's me again. Thanks for sticking with me through this nightmare. I wish I could say things got better after the cops showed up, but if anything, they got a whole lot worse. Here's what happened next. After the police raided the warehouse and rescued Lily and me, we were taken to the hospital. Lily was in bad shape, physically and mentally. She had cuts, bruises, and burns all over her body. The doctors said she was severely malnourished and dehydrated. They kept her overnight for observation, and I stayed by her side the entire time. The cops had a lot of questions, But I didn't have many answers. I told them everything I knew, how I found the site, recognized Lily, and tracked down the location. They seemed skeptical at first, but once they saw the footage from the warehouse, they realized we were telling the truth. A few days later, Lily was discharged from the hospital, and we went back home. My parents were overjoyed to see her, but it was clear she wasn't the same. She was jumpy, paranoid, and wouldn't talk about what happened. Every time we tried to bring it up, she'd shut down completely. I knew it would take time for her to heal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Then weird things started happening. It began with strange noises at night, footsteps, whispers, and the sound of something scraping against the walls. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe Lily having nightmares. But then, I started seeing things. One night, I woke up to the sound of crying. I got out of bed and followed the noise to Lily's room. The door was ajar, and I could see her sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me. I was about to go in and comfort her when I noticed something off. Her reflection in the mirror wasn't moving. She was sitting there, head in her hands, but the reflection was staring straight at me, grinning. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. The reflection's grin widened, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the mirror. When I reached the door, I turned and ran back to my room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I tried to talk to Lily about what I saw, but she just looked at me like I was crazy. "You must have been dreaming," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "There's nothing wrong with me." But I knew what I saw. I started keeping a journal, documenting all the strange occurrences, doors opening and closing on their own, objects moving, and the feeling of being watched. It felt like the house was alive, and it was driving me insane. One evening, I decided to do some research. I dug through the dark web forums, trying to find any information about the circus of the damned and the ringmaster. I found stories of other people who had encountered them, but none had survived to tell the tale. The more I read, the more I realized we were dealing with something far beyond my understanding. Then I found a post that made my blood run cold. It was from a guy who claimed to have escaped the circus years ago. He said the ringmaster wasn't just some sicko running a torture show. He was something much worse, something supernatural. According to the post, the ringmaster had made a pact with a demon, trading his soul for power and eternal life. He used his powers to trap and torment people, feeding off their fear and pain. I didn't want to believe it, but everything that had happened made too much sense. I had to do something to protect Lily and my family. I reached out to the guy who made the post, hoping he could help. He responded quickly, giving me instructions on how to perform a ritual to banish the ringmaster and break his hold over Lily. The ritual was complicated and dangerous, involving a lot of old creepy books and ingredients I'd never heard of. I had to break into an abandoned church to get some of the things I needed. The place was falling apart, and I could feel the weight of history and tragedy in the air. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to see ghosts. I gathered everything I needed and set up the ritual in my basement. I waited until midnight, when the veil between our world and the supernatural was at its thinnest. I lit the candles, drew the symbols, and began chanting the incantation the guy had given me. The air grew cold, and I could feel a presence watching me. I pushed through, focusing on the ritual. As I reached the climax, the candles flickered, and the room was plunged into darkness. I heard a voice, low and sinister, echoing through the basement. "You think you can stop me?" it hissed. "You are nothing." I ignored it, continuing to chant. The room shook, and I felt a hand grip my shoulder. I turned, and there he was, the ringmaster. His mask was gone, revealing a face twisted with rage and malevolence. His eyes were black voids, and his mouth was filled with sharp, jagged teeth. "You will suffer," he snarled, raising a hand. I felt a searing pain in my chest, like my heart was being crushed. I gasped, struggling to breathe, but I didn't stop chanting. The pain grew worse, and I thought I was going to die. But then, there was a flash of light, and the ringmaster screamed. The light enveloped him, and he writhed in agony. "No," he shouted. "This isn't over." With one final scream, he vanished, leaving me gasping on the floor. The candles relit themselves, casting a soft glow over the room. I lay there exhausted and in pain, but relieved. It was over. I staggered upstairs, finding Lily and my parents huddled together, terrified. "It's done," I said, collapsing into a chair. "He's gone." Lily looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "Hey, Reddit, it's Jake again. I know it's been a while since my last update. Things have been complicated. I wish I could tell you it was all over, that the nightmare ended when the ringmaster disappeared. But if anything, it's only gotten worse. Here's what happened next. After the ritual, things seemed to calm down. The weird noises stopped, and Lily started to act more like herself. She was still quiet and withdrawn, but at least she wasn't terrified all the time. I thought we were finally getting back to normal. I was wrong. One night, a few weeks after the ritual, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a notification from one of the dark web forums I had been lurking on. Someone had posted a new link to the Circus of the Damned. My heart sank. I didn't want to click on it, but I knew I had to. For Lily. The page loaded slowly, the familiar flickering neon lights casting an eerie glow on my screen. There was a new video feed, and the title made my blood run cold. The Star Clown Returns. I clicked on it, my hands shaking. The screen went black for a moment, then faded in to reveal the same dingy basement. And there, in the middle of the room, was Lily. She was in the clown costume again, her face painted white, her eyes wide with fear. The chat was already buzzing with excitement. The sick bastards demanding more torture, more pain. I wanted to scream, to throw my laptop across the room, but I couldn't. I had to do something. I called the cops, telling them what was happening. They didn't take me seriously at first, but after some convincing, they agreed to send someone to check it out. While I waited, I kept watching the feed, praying they would get there in time. The ringmaster stepped into view, his mask back in place. He looked directly at the camera, as if he could see me. "Welcome back, everyone," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Tonight's performance is going to be unforgettable." He pulled out the cattle prod, and Lily flinched. "No," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Please, no." The chat was full of cheering and bets on how long she would last. The ringmaster raised the prod, but just as he was about to use it, the feed cut out. The screen went black, and a message appeared. "Technical difficulties. Please stand by." I felt a surge of hope. Maybe the cops had gotten there in time. Maybe they had shut it down, but the hope was short-lived. My phone buzzed again with a new notification. Another link, another feed. I clicked on it, my stomach in knots. This time, the video showed an empty room with a single chair. The camera panned around, then settled on a figure tied to the chair. It was my mom. She was unconscious, her head slumped forward. The ringmaster stepped into view, holding a knife. "Your sister was fun," he said, looking directly at the camera. "But it's time for a new star." I felt like I was going to be sick. I had to get to her, had to save her. I grabbed my car keys and ran out the door, not caring about the danger. I drove like a madman, my mind racing with fear and rage. The address from the original raid was the only lead I had, so I headed back there, praying it wasn't too late. When I arrived, the warehouse looked abandoned, but I knew better. I crept inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was eerily quiet, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I made my way down to the basement, where the first nightmare had unfolded. The room was empty, just like in the video, but there was no sign of my mom or the ringmaster. I searched the place, tearing through rooms and corridors, but it was like they had vanished. Panic set in, and I didn't know what to do. Then I heard a faint sound, a muffled cry. I followed the noise to a hidden door, barely visible in the dim light. I forced it open and found a small hidden room. My mom was there, tied to the chair, her face pale and bruised. I rushed to her, untying the ropes and pulling her into my arms. "Mom, it's okay," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I've got you." She was barely conscious, but she managed to open her eyes and look at me. "Jake," she whispered, her voice weak. "It's not over. He's coming for all of us." I didn't know what to say. I helped her to her feet, and we made our way out of the warehouse, every shadow feeling like it was hiding the ringmaster. We got to the car, and I drove us home, my mind racing with fear and confusion. When we got back, I called the cops again, telling them everything. They promised to send someone to watch the house, but I knew it wasn't enough. The ringmaster was still out there, and he wasn't going to stop until he had us all. That night, I stayed up, watching over my family. Lily was asleep, exhausted from everything she had been through. My mom was resting, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I sat by the window, a baseball bat in my hand, ready for whatever came next. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from outside. I looked out the window and saw a figure standing in the yard, illuminated by the moonlight. It was the ringmaster, his mask reflecting the light, his eyes locked on mine. I felt a surge of rage and fear. I couldn't let him hurt my family again. I opened the window and shouted, "Stay the fuck away from us." He just stood there, staring. Then he raised a hand and pointed at me, his fingers curled like claws. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Hey, Reddit, it's Jake again. This is going to be the last part of my story. I have been through hell and back, and I think it's finally over. But I need to tell you what happened. Maybe it'll help someone else who's going through something similar. Maybe it'll just help me get some closure. Here goes. After that night, with the ringmaster standing in our yard, I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for him to come after us. I had to take the fight to him. I spent the next few days preparing, gathering everything I could think of to protect my family. I got a shotgun from a friend, some extra locks for the doors and windows, and even set up a few traps around the house. But it wasn't enough. The ringmaster was always one step ahead. Weird things kept happening. Doors would open by themselves, lights would flicker, and we'd hear footsteps at all hours of the night. It was like living in a nightmare, never knowing when or where he'd strike next. Then one night, I woke up to find Lily standing at the foot of my bed. Her eyes were wide, and she looked terrified. "Jake," she whispered, "he's in the house." My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed the shotgun and got out of bed, motioning for her to stay behind me. We crept through the house, every shadow feeling like it was hiding the ringmaster. When we reached the living room, I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the room, his mask glowing eerily in the darkness. "You can't stop me, Jake," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You and your family belong to me now." I aimed the shotgun at him, my hands shaking. "Get the fuck out of my house," I shouted. He laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You're too late," he said. "The circus is already here." Before I could react, the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. I heard Lily scream, and then there was a blinding flash of light. When I opened my eyes, we were somewhere else. It looked like an old circus tent, but twisted and distorted, like something out of a nightmare. The ringmaster stood in the center, surrounded by other figures in clown costumes. They were all watching us, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks. "Welcome to the final act," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Let the show begin." The clowns started closing in on us, their laughter echoing through the tent. I fired the shotgun, hitting one of them, but they just kept coming. Lily grabbed my hand and we ran, dodging through the maze of tents and carnival rides. Everywhere we turned, there were more clowns, more horrors. We saw people being tortured, their screams filling the air. It was like the circus from hell, and we were trapped in it. I knew we couldn't keep running forever. We had to find a way to stop the ringmaster. We stumbled into a tent that looked different from the others. It was smaller, with a single spotlight shining down on a table in the center. On the table was an old book, its pages yellowed and worn. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. It was filled with strange symbols and incantations. Lily looked over my shoulder, her eyes wide. "That's it," she said. "That's how we can stop him." I didn't know how she knew, but I trusted her. We started reading the incantations, our voices blending together. The air around us grew cold, and I could feel the presence of the ringmaster closing in. "You think you can stop me?" he snarled, stepping into the tent. "You're too late." I ignored him, focusing on the words. The tent began to shake, and the clowns outside started screaming. The light from the spotlight grew brighter, and the air crackled with energy. I could feel the power of the incantation building, like a storm about to break. The ringmaster lunged at us, but before he could reach us, there was a blinding flash of light. The tent exploded in a burst of energy, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of our living room. The shotgun was beside me, and Lily was next to me, unconscious, but alive. The house was silent, and there was no sign of the ringmaster or his clowns. I got to my feet, checking on Lily. She stood, opening her eyes. "Jake," she whispered. "Is it over?" I looked around, half expecting the ringmaster to jump out of the shadows, but there was nothing, just the quiet, empty house. "Yeah," I said, pulling her into a hug. "It's over." The police came later, and I told them everything. They didn't believe me, of course, but they couldn't deny the evidence. The warehouse, the footage, the testimonies from other victims. They launched an investigation, but I don't know if they'll ever truly understand what happened. As for me and my family, we're trying to move on. It's not easy. Lily still has nightmares, and my mom is still recovering. But we're together, and we're alive. That's what matters. I don't know where the ringmaster came from, or what he really was. Maybe he was a demon, like the guy on the forum said. Maybe he was just a very sick man. But whatever he was, he's gone now. And I pray to God he never comes back. Thank you, Reddit, for listening to my story, for giving me the strength to keep fighting. I don't know what I would have done without you. Stay safe out there. And if you ever see a link for the Circus of the Damned, don't click on it. Trust me, some nightmares are better left in the dark. I met the Black Mask hacker group on the dark web. They are the scariest hacker group in the world, and not many people know about them. Hey, Reddit, I've never really posted on here before, but I need to get this off my chest. Something happened to me that I can't keep to myself anymore. Maybe it'll serve as a warning to others. I met a hacker group on the dark web called the Black Mask, and what I experienced with them is beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It started a few months back. I've always been a tech nerd, fascinated with computers and coding since I was a kid. Over the years, that curiosity led me down some pretty dark rabbit holes on the internet. One night, I was exploring the dark web, just checking out different forums and marketplaces. Nothing too serious, just the usual curiosity. I came across a forum I'd never seen before. The design was minimalist, almost elegant in its simplicity. The name of the forum was just a black background with the words Black Mask in blood red text. I clicked on it, not really expecting much. It was filled with threads about advanced hacking techniques, tutorials on how to bypass security systems, and stories of hacks that were so sophisticated they seemed like something out of a movie. One thread caught my eye. It was titled, "Join the Inner Circle. Prove your worth." Intrigued, I clicked on it. The post was short, almost cryptic. "We are the Black Mask. We see everything. If you want to join us, prove yourself. Complete the tasks and show no fear." There was a link at the bottom of the post. Without thinking, I clicked on it. My screen went black for a moment, then a video started playing. It was a grainy, low-quality clip of a masked figure sitting in a dimly lit room. The mask was featureless, just a blank black face. The figure spoke in a distorted voice, almost robotic. "Welcome, Initiate. Your first task is simple. Find the hidden message in this video. You have 24 hours. Good luck." The video ended, and my screen returned to normal. I was hooked. I spent hours combing through the video, analyzing every frame. Finally, I found it. A single frame, almost imperceptible, had a string of code. I deciphered it and found a URL. I entered it, and it led me to another video, another task. This went on for weeks. Each task was more complex, more dangerous than the last. I was completely absorbed in it, losing sleep, skipping meals, barely leaving my apartment. I felt like I was part of something big, something important. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The tasks started to get darker. One night, I received a video that made my blood run cold. It showed a man tied to a chair, beaten and bloody. The masked figure from the first video stood behind him, holding a knife. The man was crying, begging for his life. The figure looked directly at the camera and said, "Your next task is to find out who this man is and why he deserves to die. You have 48 hours. I felt sick. This was no longer a game. This was real. But I was in too deep. I had to see it through. I spent the next 2 days digging through the dark web, using every resource I had. I found out the man was a low-level drug dealer who had crossed the wrong people. I submitted my findings, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next video showed the man again, but this time he was dead. His throat had been slit, and blood was everywhere. The masked figure leaned into the camera and said, "Good job. You're proving yourself worthy. Your next task will be your most difficult yet. Are you ready?" I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk away and forget this ever happened, but something kept pulling me back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. I don't know, but I kept going. The final task was the worst. I received a package at my door with no return address. Inside was a laptop, already turned on. A video started playing as soon as I opened it. It was a live feed of a woman tied to a bed. She was unconscious, her face bruised and bloodied. The masked figure appeared on screen again. "This is your final task. Kill her. Prove your loyalty to the Black Mask." I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding. This was insane. I couldn't do this. I wouldn't. But then the messages started. They knew everything about me. My name, my address, my family. They threatened to hurt my loved ones if I didn't comply. I was trapped. I opened the laptop again, my hands shaking. The figure was still there, waiting. They gave me an address and told me to go there, alone. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I was part of some dark web hacker group and they wanted me to kill someone? They'd lock me up and throw away the key. So I went. The address led me to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the town. The place was dark and cold, the smell of decay in the air. I found the woman, just as they said. She was awake now, crying, pleading with me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill her. But then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw the masked figure standing in the shadows. They didn't say a word, just handed me a knife. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I looked back at the woman, her eyes wide with terror. I did it. I don't know how, but I did. The moment the knife went in, I felt like I was going to throw up. I watched as the life drained from her eyes, her body going limp. The figure stepped forward, taking the knife from my hand. They whispered something in my ear, but I couldn't hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. I left the warehouse in a daze, my clothes soaked in blood. I don't remember getting home. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All I could see was her face. All I could hear was her screams. Then the messages started again. They congratulated me, told me I was now part of the Black Mask. I was one of them. I wanted to scream, to tear my skin off, just to get rid of the feeling of their eyes on me. But there was nothing I could do. I was trapped. Now, I live in constant fear. They watch me. Even now. I know they do. I see the shadows move in the corners of my eyes, hear the whispers when I'm alone. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I feel like I'm losing my mind, so I'm telling you all this as a warning. Stay away from the dark web. Stay away from the Black Mask. Once you're in, there's no way out. And the things they make you do, you can never escape them. It's been a few weeks since I told you all about what happened. I'm still trying to piece everything together. The nightmares have gotten worse, and every day feels like I'm walking on the edge of a knife. But there's more to tell, and I need to get it out before I lose my nerve. After the warehouse incident, things didn't just go back to normal. They got worse. I thought maybe I could just lay low, keep my head down, and pretend none of this ever happened. But the Black Mask had other plans. I started getting strange packages at my door. The first one was a small nondescript box. Inside was a burner phone and a note. "Keep this with you at all times. Instructions will follow." My heart sank. I knew I wasn't out of the woods yet. The first call came a few days later, in the middle of the night. The same distorted voice I'd heard in the video spoke. "We have another task for you. Failure is not an option." They gave me an address and told me to be there at midnight. No further details. No chance to refuse. The address led me to a seedy motel on the outskirts of the town, the kind of place where people go to disappear, either temporarily or permanently. I was supposed to meet someone in room 13. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. A man opened the door, his eyes darting around nervously. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and his clothes were rumpled and stained. He motioned for me to come in and quickly shut the door behind me. "Are you with them?" he asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He handed me a USB drive. "This has everything you need. Do it quickly, and don't get caught. They'll kill me if you fail." Before I could ask any questions, he shoved me back, out the door, and slammed it shut. I took the drive home, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? I plugged it into my computer, and a series of files appeared. Blueprints, security codes, and a list of names. It was a plan for a heist, a high-profile break-in at a tech company's headquarters. They wanted me to hack into their system and steal sensitive data. I spent the next few days preparing, barely eating or sleeping. The pressure was immense, but the fear of what the Black Mask would do to me if I failed was even worse. I managed to pull it off, but not without some close calls. I sent the data to the contact they provided and waited. The response was swift. Another package, this time with cash and a note. "Good job, more to come." I felt a twisted mix of relief and dread. I was now their pawn, their tool, and there was no way out. But the worst part was the surveillance. They were watching me, constantly. I found hidden cameras in my apartment, microphones embedded in my walls. Every time I went out, I felt eyes on me. I started seeing the same faces in the crowd, shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. One night, I decided to test it. I left my apartment and walked to a nearby park. I sat on a bench, pretending to be on my phone, but really, I was watching. Sure enough, a man in a dark hoodie appeared, loitering by a tree. He was pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes never left me. I snapped a photo of him, thinking I could use it as evidence. But the next day, I received a chilling message on the burner phone. "Stop trying to be clever. We are always watching." Things escalated from there. I started getting calls in the middle of the night, the voice on the other end just breathing heavily. My family and friends were being contacted too. They received cryptic messages and threats. I tried to warn them, but it only seemed to make things worse. One day, I came home to find my apartment ransacked. Everything was torn apart, my belongings strewn everywhere. On the wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. "You belong to us." I knew I couldn't go to the police. They'd think I was crazy. Or worse, they'd get involved and end up as targets themselves. I felt completely alone, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Then one night, I got another call. This time, it was different. The voice was calm, almost soothing. "We have one last task for you," it said. "If you succeed, you'll be free. But if you fail, well, you know what will happen." They gave me another address, this time in a wealthy neighborhood. They wanted me to break into a mansion and retrieve something from a safe. It sounded simple, but I knew better by now. Nothing with the black mask was ever simple. I arrived at the mansion under the cover of darkness. The place was huge, with high walls and security cameras everywhere. I managed to disable the cameras and pick the lock on the gate. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I found the safe in an office upstairs. It took me a while, but I managed to crack it open. Inside was a single envelope. I took it and left as quickly as I could. When I got home, I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of me, taken through my apartment window. Along with it was a note. "You're free, for now." I destroyed the envelope and the photo, but the sense of dread never left me. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know they're still watching, still waiting for the next time they need me. So here I am, telling you my story as a warning. The dark web is no place for curiosity. It's a trap, a web of shadows that will consume you if you're not careful. Stay away from the black mask. They are always watching, and once you're in, there's no way out. I wish I could tell you things got better after that last task. I wish I could say I found a way to escape, to get my life back. But if I did, I'd be lying. The truth is, the black mask still has its claws in me, and it's only gotten worse. After the mansion job, I tried to go back to some semblance of normalcy. I went back to work, tried to reconnect with friends and family, and pretended like everything was okay. But it wasn't. The paranoia was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, checking the corners of every room for hidden cameras. I knew they were still watching. A couple of weeks passed without any contact from the black mask. I started to think maybe they really had let me go. Maybe I was free. But then, one night, I got a call on the burner phone. I knew immediately who it was. The distorted voice was back, colder and more menacing than ever. "We need you to do something for us. There's a package at your door. Bring it to the address inside and follow the instructions exactly. No questions, no mistakes." I opened my door to find a plain brown box sitting on the mat. My hands were shaking as I picked it up and brought it inside. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. I knew whatever was inside would drag me deeper into their world. Eventually, I worked up the courage to open the box. Inside was a smaller box, a note, and a flash drive. The note had an address written on it, along with a single word, "Deliver." I plugged the flash drive into my computer, and a video started playing. The same masked figure appeared, their voice as cold and robotic as ever. Inside the smaller box is a device. It is crucial that you deliver it to the address without being detected. Failure will result in severe consequences. I opened the smaller box to find what looked like a simple, unmarked black device. It was small enough to fit in my pocket, but I had no idea what it was or what it did. The whole thing felt like a setup, but I had no choice. I had to follow their orders. The address led me to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. It was late at night, and the streets were deserted. The building was an old abandoned warehouse, much like the one from the first task. I slipped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was dark and smelled of rust and decay. I followed the directions from the video, winding my way through the maze of corridors until I reached a small windowless room. Inside, there was a single table with a laptop on it. I placed the device on the table as instructed and waited. The laptop screen flickered to life, and the masked figure appeared once more. Good. Now leave the building and do not look back. This device will activate in 5 minutes. If you are still inside, you will not survive. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I burst out of the warehouse and kept running until I was several blocks away. Only then did I stop and look back. The warehouse was still standing, but I could hear a faint hum, followed by a low rumbling sound. I never found out what that device did, and I didn't want to. I just wanted to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. But I knew it wasn't over. It never would be. A few nights later, I woke up to find my apartment door ajar. I always locked it before going to bed, but now it was wide open. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and slowly made my way through the apartment. Everything seemed normal until I reached my bedroom. On my bed was a single black rose, the petals dark and velvety. Beside it was a note. We are always watching. Never forget. I knew then that they could get to me anytime, anywhere. There was no escaping them. The fear consumed me, making it impossible to live a normal life. I started sleeping with the lights on, barricading my door every night. But it didn't matter. They always found a way to remind me that they were there. One night, I came home to find my walls covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, all of me, taken at different times and places. Some were from years ago, others from just days before. There were photos of me at work, at the grocery store, even in my own apartment. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They had been watching me for years. Among the photos, one stood out. It was a picture of me sleeping, taken from inside my bedroom. I ripped it off the wall, my hands shaking. On the back was a message. We own you. I felt like I was losing my mind. The constant surveillance, the fear, the uncertainty. It was all too much. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know what to do. The police couldn't help me, and I had no one else to turn to. Then one day, I received an email from an unknown address. It was short and to the point. We can help you. Meet us at the old train station at midnight. I knew it was a trap. It had to be. But I was desperate. I couldn't go on living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next task, the next threat. So I went. The train station was abandoned, its windows boarded up, and the tracks overgrown with weeds. I waited in the shadows, my heart racing. Just as the clock struck midnight, a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was a woman, her face hidden by a hood. She looked around nervously before approaching me. "You're in danger," she whispered. "The black mask won't stop until they have what they want, but there's a way out." I listened, my mind racing. She told me about a safe house, a place where I could go to disappear, to start over. It sounded too good to be true, but I was out of options. She handed me a slip of paper with an address and instructions on how to get there. I thanked her, and turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "Be careful," she said. "They're always watching." I didn't sleep that night. I packed a bag and left my apartment, making my way to the address she'd given me. It was a small, nondescript house in a quiet neighborhood. I knocked on the door, and a man opened it, his face lined with worry. "You must be the one she told us about," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Welcome to your new life." The house was simple but comfortable. The man introduced himself as John and told me about the others who had come before me, people who had also been targeted by the Black Mask. They had all found refuge here, a chance to start over. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could finally escape the nightmare. Maybe I could finally be free. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The Black Mask was still out there, still watching, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. So here I am, living in a safe house, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day they find me again. I don't know how much longer I can keep running, but I'll keep fighting as long as I can. This is my warning to you all. Stay away from the dark web. Stay away from the Black Mask. Once you're in, there's no way out. And the things they make you do, you can never escape them. I had hoped that the safe house would be my sanctuary, a place where the Black Mask couldn't reach me. For a while, it seemed to work. John and the others were kind and supportive, each of them bearing their own scars from encounters with the Black Mask. We became a makeshift family, bonded by our shared trauma, but the fear never truly left me. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door, sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before they found me again. Then one night, my worst fears were realized. I woke up to the sound of whispering voices outside my window. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. There, standing in the shadows, were two figures wearing the unmistakable black masks. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my bag, which I had kept packed for emergencies, and bolted down the stairs. I didn't stop to wake John or the others. I just ran. The front door creaked as I opened it, and I slipped into the night, praying they hadn't heard me. I ran through the dark streets, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced as I tried to think of where to go. I couldn't go back to my old life, and the safe house was no longer safe. I needed to disappear completely. As I turned a corner, I saw a black van parked at the end of the street. The engine was running, and the driver was a shadowy figure behind the wheel. My stomach dropped. They had planned this. They were one step ahead of me. I ducked into an alley, my mind racing. There had to be another way out. I scrambled over a fence, tearing my clothes and skin in the process. The pain was nothing compared to the terror driving me forward. I needed to keep moving. I found myself in a deserted part of town, the buildings abandoned and crumbling. It was the perfect place to hide, but also the perfect place for them to find me. I slipped into an old warehouse, the door creaking loudly in the silence. Inside, it was dark and musty, the air thick with dust. I crouched behind a stack of old crates, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear footsteps outside, the sound of doors opening and closing. They were searching for me. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. Minutes felt like hours as I waited in the darkness. The footsteps grew closer, the sound of their voices sending chills down my spine. They were methodical, checking every room, every corner. I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me. Then the door to the warehouse creaked open. A beam of light swept across the room, illuminating the dust particles in the air. I pressed myself against the crates, trying to make myself as small as possible. The light moved closer, and I could hear the sound of their breathing. Just when I thought they would find me, the light moved away. The door creaked shut, and I heard their footsteps fading into the distance. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me, but I knew I couldn't stay here. They would be back. I slipped out of the warehouse, keeping to the shadows. I needed a plan, a way to stay one step ahead of them. My mind raced as I tried to think of my next move. Then it hit me. I needed to find the woman who had helped me. She seemed to know more about the Black Mask than anyone else. I made my way to a payphone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number she had given me. The phone rang, each ring echoing in the silence. Just when I thought it would go to voicemail, she answered. "It's me," I whispered, my voice shaking. "They found me. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end, then her voice, calm and steady. "Meet me at the old library on 5th Street. Come alone." I hung up and made my way to the library, my heart pounding. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sound the echo of my footsteps. When I arrived, the library was dark and abandoned, its windows boarded up. I slipped inside through a broken window, the glass crunching under my feet. The interior was just as dilapidated as the exterior, the shelves empty and the floor covered in debris. I made my way to the back, where a dim light flickered. The woman was waiting for me, her face partially hidden by the shadows. She motioned for me to sit, and I did, my mind racing with questions. "They won't stop until they have what they want," she said, her voice low. "But there's a way to turn the tables." She handed me a folder, thick with documents and photographs. "This is everything we have on the Black Mask, their operations, their members, their weaknesses. If we can expose them, we can take them down." I stared at the folder, my hands trembling. This was it, the chance to fight back. But it was also a huge risk. The Black Mask was powerful and ruthless. If we failed, the consequences would be deadly. "We can't do this alone," I said, my voice shaking. "We need help." She nodded. "I have contacts, people who are willing to fight back. But we need to move quickly. They're already on to you." We spent the next few hours going over the plan, my fear slowly giving way to determination. This was our chance to end this nightmare once and for all. But just as we were about to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed through the library. My heart raced as I realized we were out of time. The Black Mask had found us. The woman grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to go, now." We ran through the darkened library, the sound of footsteps growing closer. Just as we reached the back door, it burst open, and the masked figures stepped through. I fought back, adrenaline surging through me, but they were too strong. I felt a sharp pain in my side as one of them struck me, and I fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the woman's face, her expression, one of determination and fear. Then darkness. When I woke up, I was in a dark room, tied to a chair. The masked figure stood before me, their cold eyes staring into mine. "You thought you could escape," they said, their voice dripping with malice. "But no one escapes the Black Mask." I knew then that I was trapped, and there was no way out. The nightmare was far from over. and the worst was yet to come. I woke up in a cold, dark room, the smell of damp concrete and metal filling my nostrils. My head throbbed, and I realized I was tied to a chair, my wrists and ankles bound tightly. Panic surged through me as I struggled against the restraints, but it was no use. I was trapped. The door creaked open, and the familiar masked figure stepped into the room. This time, they were accompanied by two others, each wearing the same featureless black mask. The leader, the one I had come to fear more than anything, stepped forward and leaned down, their cold eyes boring into mine. "You've been a very troublesome pawn," they said, their voice a distorted hiss. "But it ends here." I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. "What do you want from me?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. They straightened up, their mask giving nothing away. "We want you to understand that there is no escape. You belong to us." The other two figures stepped forward, each holding a different instrument of torture. One had a knife, its blade glinting ominously in the dim light. The other held a pair of pliers, the metal jaws opening and closing with a sickening click. "We've decided to make an example of you," the leader said, their voice cold and detached, "to show others what happens when they try to defy us." I struggled again, my heart pounding in my chest. "Please, don't do this," I begged. "I'll do whatever you want." The leader tilted their head, considering. "Oh, we know you will. But first, we need to ensure your loyalty." The next few hours were a blur of pain and terror. They cut me, burned me, broke me in ways I didn't think possible. I screamed until my throat was raw, but no one came to help. The only sounds were my own cries and their cold, methodical voices. When they finally stopped, I was a broken mess, bloodied, bruised, barely conscious. The leader leaned down again, their mask inches from my face. "Do you understand now?" they whispered. "You are ours. Forever." I could barely nod, the pain overwhelming, but I knew I had to survive, had to find a way out of this nightmare. They untied me and dragged me to a small windowless cell. The door slammed shut, and I was left alone in the darkness. Time lost all meaning as I lay there, my body throbbing with pain. Sleep was impossible, the terror too great. Days, maybe weeks, passed in that cell. I was given just enough food and water to keep me alive, but nothing more. The isolation, the darkness, the constant fear, it was enough to drive anyone mad. Then one day, the door opened, and a new figure stepped inside. This one wasn't wearing a mask. She was a woman, her face kind but stern. She knelt down beside me, her eyes filled with a mix of pity and resolve. "Are you ready to fight back?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I stared at her, hope flickering to life in my chest. "Who are you?" I croaked. She smiled, a small, sad smile. "An ally. We've been watching, waiting for the right moment. The Black Mask is powerful, but they're not invincible." She helped me to my feet, her touch gentle but firm. "We need to move quickly. They'll be back soon." She led me through a maze of corridors, each one darker and more foreboding than the last. I could hear voices in the distance, the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. We slipped through the shadows, avoiding detection. Finally, we reached a small hidden door. She pushed it open, revealing a narrow passage that led to the outside. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the cell. "Go," she urged. "We have people waiting to help you." I hesitated, looking back at her. "What about you?" She shook her head. "I'll be fine. Just go." I ran, my legs weak and unsteady. but driven by a newfound determination. I didn't stop until I reached a van parked at the end of the alley. The door opened and a group of people helped me inside, their faces a blur of concern and urgency. As the van sped away, I looked back at the building, a dark silhouette against the night sky. The Black Mask was still out there, still watching, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies, people willing to fight back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of recovery and planning. The woman who had rescued me, whose name I learned was Sarah, was part of a resistance group dedicated to taking down the Black Mask. They had been gathering intel, recruiting members, and waiting for the right moment to strike. With their help, I began to heal, both physically and mentally. The nightmares still haunted me, the memories of what they had done seared into my mind. But I was no longer helpless. I had a purpose, a mission. We spent months preparing, gathering evidence, and planning our attack. The Black Mask had many enemies, people who had been wronged, who had lost loved ones. Together, we formed a coalition, a united front against the darkness. The day of reckoning finally came. We launched our assault with precision and determination, striking at the heart of the Black Mask's operations. It was a fierce battle, one that cost many lives. But in the end, we prevailed. The leaders of the Black Mask were captured, their organization dismantled, the survivors were freed, and justice was served. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was a start. As I stood among the ruins of their empire, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. I knew I could never forget what they had done, what I had endured, but I also knew I had the strength to move forward. To those reading this, heed my warning. The dark web is a place of shadows and danger, a realm where monsters wear human faces. Stay away from the Black Mask, and remember, there are always those willing to fight back, to stand up against the darkness. This is my story, my battle, and though it nearly destroyed me, it also made me stronger. I am no longer a pawn, no longer a victim. I am a survivor, and I will continue to fight, to ensure that the Black Mask never rises again.